Yeah, it's a great way of framing it. And I think too, it's who are you tax planning for? And what I mean by that, and I know you get to it in the book, right? Are you tax planning for you and your spouse now, or your spouse as they continue on after you pass away? Or are you tax planning for your children, right? I mean, these all play into your approach to tax planning.
Yeah, and Jason, so that is one of the responses that I get where I say, a lot of times these traditional retirement accounts aren't that heavily taxed during the original owner's lifetime. A lot of times the response is, but what about the next generation?
Mhm.
Well, I have a few thoughts on that. First of all, it is perfectly legitimate. If mom and dad are in the 22% bracket and they know son or daughter is in the 37% bracket, they want to do Roth conversions to capture a 15% intergenerational delta, right? They leave a traditional IRA to the son or daughter, they're going to pay 37 cents on the dollar versus they pay 22 cents on the dollar and they want to capture that and they can afford it. Great. Like I have no problem with that. But I also don't think that's a compelling, I don't think there's no moral compulsion to do that. So what I mean by that is we contribute to our own retirement accounts to get us and our spouses to and through retirement.
Mhm.
So when I was 32 years old, I changed jobs and I go, sign up for the 401k and I make the traditional versus Roth decision. I think we assess that based on what's most likely to get me and my spouse to and through retirement. Okay. I don't think we assess that based on my future kid who may not even be born yet or might be 5 years old. What is the tax that they're going to pay on that? Right. I don't think we assess that decision based on the speculative future tax liability of somebody who's not me or my spouse.
Sure.
The other thing I'd say is, are we so sure your kid's going to pay all this tax on that account? Maybe they inherit when they're 55 and they're on the verge of retirement and they say, oh, I just got this $500,000 IRA. You
Mm.
know what I could do? I could start living off that
Right.
as my primary means of support in retirement. And all of a sudden they're going through the high standard deduction, the 10% bracket, the 12% bracket. They might pay less tax than you
Mhm.
would on that retirement account. So, I just think I would argue sometimes in this conversation, we lose the forest for the trees. The tree being someone who gets a sizable asset might have to pay sizable taxes. They're still better off for having gotten that asset
Sure.
versus the forest of, I think the job of our retirement accounts is to get us and our spouses to and through retirement. I don't think it's to manage the speculative tax liability of somebody who's not me or my spouse.
Sure.
That's my opinion. And this is all subjective, to be fair.
Right. Right.
That's my take on it. But I know other people approach it differently.
Sure. Yeah, I love it. And then towards the end of our financial lives or end of our lives, right? I mean, there are these estate planning, estate tax planning opportunities. There's gifting. The estate tax stuff, I mean, you got to be pretty fortunate if you're coming up to some federal estate tax thresholds, especially with the portability between spouses there and combining it. So
Yes.
I don't think we'll go too deep down there, but there are those estate tax, and gift tax planning opportunities later in life, right?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on that. One, you're right. Now we have a 15 million per person exemption for federal estate taxes. So a married couple, you mentioned portability. It's the greatest tactic for married couples to mitigate federal estate taxes. Essentially in today's environment, it would be 30 million of combined wealth you could
Right.
leave to the next generation. Not a lot of folks are going to die with 30 million of wealth.
Mhm.
But then you do say, it's funny, I think it's a handful of our northern states, and I believe Hawaii, although don't quote me on that, have state estate taxes.
Yes.
And these things, to my mind, the best time to plan for them is later in life. Because, like, I'll give you an example. My understanding is Oregon imposes a state estate tax at $1 million of estate value,
Hmm.
which you don't have to be,
No,
a
right.
Rockefeller to have $1 million. Now, I don't find that compelling of a planning tactic because, in theory, you could be working with someone, they're worth 2.5 million, 3.5 million, they're in their mid 50s. Oh, but you got Oregon estate tax. So what? You're supposed to just give away $1.5 million before you've fully funded your own retirement? I think the best time to deal with an issue like that, and by the way, I think some of these state-to-state taxes will get mitigated over the next few years as constituents start knocking on doors and saying, wait a minute, I'm paying these state-to-state taxes. But I do think the best time to usually handle those, because you don't want to be giving $1.5 million to the next generation to avoid this tax just in your 50s. I think the best time to plan for that is later in life, where it's like, look, financially, I'm good. And yeah, there's this state-to-state tax issue. So maybe I start doing some planning or some Roth conversions to get some income tax out of my estate, or some gifting. There's the annual exclusion gifts. And this number always changes. I think it's $19,000 a person, and you can double up with spouses, and then maybe your kid's got a spouse. So I think it's like $76,000 between generation 1, generation 2, if they're both married. So that's something to think about as well. The other thing I'll mention is charitable giving. A couple of years ago at a homily, I heard this concept, and I was like, oh, this is smart. What you could in theory do with your IRA is treat your church, or you could do another charity, treat your church as just an additional child. So think about, somebody with a $3 million IRA, and say they're the surviving spouse. So, say usually it's the husband's already passed. So mom is the surviving spouse. She's got a $3 million IRA and 3 kids. Well, you know what she could do? She could just name each of the 3 kids as 1/3 beneficiaries. They each get $1 million of a traditional IRA. Or she could name each of the 3 kids and her church as 25% beneficiaries. So they'd each get $750,000. And the thing is, what she would have done with that is she would have taken $250,000 away from each of her children, but it would have been the highest tax $250,000.
Right.
So yes, they lose out. First of all, they're probably going to be just fine with the $750,000. They're probably going to be okay. They have their own earnings capacity and their own assets and whatnot. But by giving $750,000 to the church, she's reduced the IRA that goes to the kids by $250,000 each. But it's the highest tax piece because of the progressive tax rate. So in the book, we refer to that as the church IRA. I like that concept. So there's different things you could be thinking about. And then the last one is just location. If I want to leave some money to the church, some money to my kid, and I got a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, and theoretically the amounts are the right amounts, leave the Roth IRA to the kid, the traditional to the church. You skip out on taxes that way. Don't leave the Roth to the church and the traditional to the kid, because now you created more tax by doing that. So there's little things that can absolutely be done. It's such, in today's environment, when we think about estate planning, we're actually more thinking about income tax than estate tax. Years ago, estate tax was a much lower threshold, so people thought about it a lot more. But with the federal exemption going so high, it's not as pressing unless you sold the tech company or something like that, or you're a quarterback or in the NFL or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much here. It's all great content. And I love, we could just go on and on. RMDs and using charitable donations to do the tax planning around some R&Ds. So much here, and I appreciate your time. It's all been great. I think
the opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration.